the adverse effect of terrorism. Kenya and its people have witnessed a surge in terrorist attacks and violent extremism. The impact of this have been most felt on infrastructure, physical and human capital, productivity, and economic growth. Furthermore, terrorist attack and violent extremism have increased uncertainty in the investment climate, disrupted household spending and livelihood, dissuaded foreign direct investment, and led to a real reallocation of resources from growth-enhancing investments to spending designed to increase national security. Today, we look at the effects of terrorism and violent extremism on the tourism sector, foreign direct investment and the Nairobi Stock Exchange, effects and resource allocation and economies of the counties as well. And also big on this is the debate about also arming the private firms and security firms. That has been a very contentious debate as well, right? We have Mr. Asewe with us here. He will be telling us more about this. That will be much later. We'll give him a proper introduction in the course of the program. We're eagerly awaiting for other panelists to join us as well this morning and take a keener look on how we can secure our business environment. So, you know the drill. You can head over to our Twitter handle, which is AM Live NTV. AM Live NTV is a profile name on Facebook, and 20686 is our SMS portal. So let's get in the swing of things and look at also what is fresh off the press this morning. We begin with the Daily Nation. This is what is headlining the front page of the Daily Nation today. We're still here. This is the splash today. Faces of victory. Hours after gunmen stormed the city business complex, Bryant survivors stepped from ground zero yesterday morning to the waiting arms of their friends and families. But it was the smiles on their faces and the spring in their steps that told a bigger, more important story, that of sweet victory against terrorism. And you have the story on page 2 to 10 of the Daily Nation today. You can see some of the pictures here, people celebrating after they were rejoined with their relatives. People react as they reunite with family and friends after being evacuated from the 14 Riverside Drive complex in Nairobi yesterday. Also, attack suspect lived with jihadist woman, the terrorist from Muchadha. This is Gishunge, called himself Farouk or Salim, lived with a terrorism sympathizer, loved music and kept cats for pets. You have his story continuing on page 2 of today's Daily Nation. Suspect was a loner, only interacted with his butcher and wife. He was a quiet man who loved his car, cats and music. He kept to himself, only interacting with his butcher and the woman he lived with. On the estate security WhatsApp group, he never uttered a word. He called himself Farouk, but his mobile phone SIM card was registered under the name Ali Salim Gishunge. The woman he lived with, presumed by his neighbors to have been his wife, is named Violet Kemunto Omoyo. On her WhatsApp profile, she referred to herself as an Al-Shabaab bride. And at a glance, you can look here. Also, a loner who was always smartly dressed and liked to play loud music in his car even when he arrived late. A heavily built, middle-aged man of medium complexion who liked to shave his head clean but kept a long beard, which he had dyed brown. He told them he hailed from Kiambu and registered himself at the estate gate as Salim. This story is tucked away on page 2. Remember, also it continues on page 3 up to 10 of the Daily Nation. And this is your splash today if you're just waking up this morning. And looking at the sidebar there also, we have a bite here from President Uhuru Kenyatta saying we will seek out every single person who was involved in the funding, planning and execution of the heinous act. We will pursue them relentlessly wherever they will be until they are held to account. 21, that is the number of casualties from Tuesday's attack. They include 16 Kenyans, 1 Briton, 1 American, and 3 from unspecified African nations. 1 police officer died from gunshot wounds. Also, 700, the number of people rescued from the attack by a combined force of police and civilian gun holders. 100 number of police officers drawn from different formations of the service who responded to the attack. And you can see here also, this is Guango Estate in Muchadha, Kiambu County, where one of the suspects in Tuesday's attack on a Nairobi business complex lived there. You have it. And as I've mentioned, you have the story on page 2 up to 10 of today's Daily Nation. Let's move on to see what we have also on the front page of the Standard. And this is your splash today. Killer's secret life and masks devil in your neighborhood. Terrorists who took part in the killing of at least 14 people in Riverside Hotel lived an ordinary life in Kiambu for almost a year. Little did people know he was on a deadly suicide mission. And that is the story and the picture. You can see the related picture there of the estate. This is Guango Estate in Ruaka, Kiambu County. And on Monday, the terrorist and the woman he lived with put up for sale all their household goods, including more than 3 pairs of her shoes. You can see all of them they are splashed here. Some of the household items, the TV there, microwave and sofa set, also shoes as well, right? And casseroles. They're all here on the front page of the Standard this morning. This is a car, right? Bogus number plate, the Toyota Ractis used by the attackers to 14 Riverside Drive, and which terrorist Idris had been using for months at bogus number plates. Yesterday, police found another Ractis with similar registration details in Kitengela, Kajiado County. Regrets, it continues to say here. Let me just begin with the Homeland Defense and what the president said. We will hunt and punish those behind heinous act, vows president. And this is Kenya's resolve. Head of state declares that government will pursue the planners and financiers of terrorist attack in which at least 14 people were killed. Local and international leaders, including embattled British Premier Theresa May, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga and Baringo Senator Gideon Moi, join in widespread condemnation of attack. And also there are regrets here, how students' lover fell into death trap. Woman regrets having led her partner from Australia to ill-fated upscale Dusit D2 hotel. The man had arrived in the country at the weekend and initially preferred to check into a different hotel. And the operation, how special forces killed the terrorist. Officers from an elite squad signaled their commander that they had established where the criminals were hiding at dawn and sought orders to unleash the firepower. And this also is a bite there from the president, that is President Uhuru Kenyatta, and it says, quote unquote, "We are grieving this morning. My heart and that of every Kenyan goes out to the innocent violated by senseless violence. We wish the injured quick recovery, and we will continue to pray for them." And we will continue to pray for them. This is but there from President Uhuru Kenyatta. This story, you have a special coverage of it on page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, 12, and 13 of the Standard this morning. A quick look now at what we have on the front page of the Star. 2 Dusit killers were from Kiambu, right? This Kiambu, Nyeri, and Eric Kinyanjui came from Ngecha in Limuru, and Farouk from Majengo in Nyeri. This story continues on page 4 and 5 of the Star. Casualties, 16 confirmed dead, 50 still missing, according to Red Cross. And you can continue with this story also on page 4 and 5 of the Star. All right, my stomach couldn't stop rumbling, says witness. This is the ordeal at Dusit there, Dusit, and that story continues on page 7 of the Star this morning. Also, we have testimonies. City tycoon tells of last telephone call with son. He was one of the tycoon victims ambushed by a group of terrorists as they wreaked havoc in the calm and leafy Riverside stretch on Tuesday. For Habil Yassin, it started as a normal afternoon. He left a local restaurant after having lunch and was headed back to his third-floor office to wind up his work before rejoining his family. Yassin had no notion of the improbability of his own survival. And this story continues on page 6 of the Star this morning. Kenyatta vows to punish funders, planners of attack. Righteous anger, it says there. This story continues on page 2. And FBI, DCI take over terrorist attack investigations. This story continues on page 2. And also, we have there all issues about the handshake. Sonko shuttle diplomacy unites Joho and Shabal. That story continues on page 2. page 25, I should say, of the Star. We continue to also see what the People Daily is holding for us. Brave, loving, patriotic, in paradise. As it says here, I love you, my sister, I love you too. Hopefully, we will see each other very soon. This was a brief telephone chat between two sisters, but tragically, one of them was shortly felled by terrorists in the Dusit D2 attack. That story continues on page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9. Also, James Udwar, who was a victim of this, also his face is on the front page. And these are some of the victims that are splashed today on the front page of the People Daily. We have Abdallah Mohammed, who was laid to rest yesterday. Also, Faisal Rashid Haji, Bernadette Kunjalo, she was a receptionist at the complex. Also, Tish Mutindi Wenjiku, as well as Jason Spandler, who was from the United States. These are the stories that, these are the pictures of the victims, and the stories are well splashed on page 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, and 9 as well of the People Daily this morning. Let's see what the Business Daily holds for us today, and this is our splash. NAC defies terror attack, gains 19 billion shillings in a day, right? And it says that rebound stock market hits a 3-month high while it hits, I should say, a 3-month high while shilling holds steady in fast trading session after Al-Shabaab strike. That story continues on page 4 of the Business Daily. And remember, today in the market, we are trying to see what is and has been the impact of terrorism and violent extremism in the country as far as the economy is concerned. Looking at all facets of the economy, the tourism sector, agriculture, the financial sector as well. So we'll be joined much later in the course of the program with our panelists who are already here to shed light on what actually they know right now as far as terrorism is concerned. But we can see that, yes, the Nairobi Security Exchange was not really actually spooked. That is, the stock market was not spooked by the effects of this attack on Dusit D2 complex. The story, as I've mentioned, you have it on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. KRA banks on tech to net 3 million shillings. New taxpayers in 3 years, it says. And this story also continues on page 2 of the Business Daily. Tala to spend 7 billion shillings on Turkana oil this year is another story. You can follow it on page 2 of the Business Daily. And on the ticker today also, XPS Omolo 6.8 million shillings. Former Public Service Principal Secretary Lilian Omolo has petitioned the court to release to her 2.26 million shillings monthly from her frozen accounts. Again, she cannot meet her family food, housing and school needs. This story continues on page 6 of the Business Daily. Today's digit is 3.2 billion shillings. That is all about investment. UK solar farm box or B-box has secured for Kenyan expansion. That is a digit there, 3.2 billion shillings. Page 19 carries the story. And Renault pumps 58 million shillings into KVM. French car maker Renault has pumped about 58 million shillings into upgrading the Kenya vehicle manufacturers. This story continues on page 8 of the Business Daily. Fuel prices cut set to reduce inflation. Analysts have tipped inflation to fall below the preferred central bank range following the significant fall in fuel prices this month. Also, that story tucked away on page 19 of the Business Daily. We cross over now to Tanzania, where we have the Citizen for us. Lawyers challenge Ndugai's statement. Speaker saying Parliament will temporarily stop working with Controller and Auditor General is bad and a threat to constitutional democracy. This story continues on page 2 of the Citizen. We have a quote there from Job Ndugai saying, quote unquote, we will have no interest at all to continue working with the CAG, giving him the opportunity to work with those he is convinced and not as weak as we are. That story, you follow it on page 2. Also, ex-Nigerian leader pays John Pombe Magufuli a courtesy call, and you can see them here exchanging niceties. President John Magufuli shaking hands with former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo at State House in Dar es Salaam yesterday. The two leaders held talks on various issues. Also, transporters. It says transporters given 2 months in new EAC load low. That story tucked away on page 2. And also Nairobi attack. Why Dusit Hotel complex? That is a probing question also on the front page of the Citizen in Tanzania. Let's see what Mwananchi has still in Tanzania. Mbatia, naona kuna giza nene uchaguzi ujao. That is a splash. You can follow the story on page 2. It's all about democracy. And Dugai, swala la bunge na CAG ni la muda. That is another sidebar story there on the front page of Mwananchi, still in Tanzania. A quick look now at what we have on the front page of, I just want to lift that quickly for you, the Daily Monitor in Uganda. This is what you're waking up to today. Nairobi terror attack. We hid for 12 hours as it rained bullets. Terrorist rented house in city suburb. Dark day. Special coverage of a day hell broke loose. This is in Uganda, and they're carrying the story of what really happened here in Nairobi. You have this special coverage on page 3, 4, 5, 27, 28, and 29 of the Daily Monitor if you're waking up in Uganda. And also, do not pamper investors. This is what Suruma is saying. This was a keynote speech during the Makerere graduation. Graduates of the School of Science and Veterinary Medicine jubilate after being awarded degrees at Makerere University's 69th graduation ceremony at the main campus in Kampala yesterday. The university's Chancellor, Professor Ezra Suruma, presided over the function. That story continues on page 2 of the Daily Monitor if you're waking up in Uganda. We want to cross over now to Rwanda, where we have Rwanda Education, that is, the Rwanda Education Board officials taken to task for sloppy accounting. That's a splash. And that story continues on page 5 of the New Times. Rwanda Education Board Director here can be seen. This is Irene Ndayambaje appearing before Senate yesterday. Also, Gishwati Mukura Park, next tourism frontier on page 2 of the New Times, and construction of modern multi-sport arena kicks off. This story continues on page 8 of the New Times if you're waking up in Rwanda. I want to show you quickly what also we do have on the front page of the East African. Let me just go there and lift that quickly for you so that you can actually see what has been or is actually the main headline on the front page of the East African. Just a quick one as I head over there to try and see if I can lift it for you so that you can also be in the know on what is a splash today. And it's all about the election in Congo. Tshisekedi is declared winner. Can he fix a broken Congo? That is the question. Surprise announcement as the Catholic Church disputes results. A coalition government could be on the cards. The story is tucked away on page 8 and 9 of the East African. Also, Tanzanian gets its second Airbus, now eyeing international routes. You can follow that story on page 5. Shockers Burundi asks students to raise poll cash. This story continues also inside the East African this week. We continue, and we finally can see also what is happening on the international market scene. Just a quick look at what we have on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Parliament sinks May's Brexit deal. Big votes lost for UK's Prime Minister raises new uncertainty ahead of Britain's EU exit date. We have also this fresh story for you this morning, and you can actually go and take a look at what is on page 6 of the Wall Street Journal. Barr says he won't cave to pressure. That is the Attorney General nominee William Barr promised on Tuesday never to cave to political pressure from President Trump or elsewhere. And Nairobi hotel under siege in a deadly Somali terrorist attack. This is the picture that is on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Search for cover, an explosion and gunfire Tuesday sent people fleeing as an upscale Nairobi hotel popular with tourists and business travelers. Somali extremists claimed responsibility for the attack. Three were multiple fatalities, including one American. And this story, you can follow it on page 8 of the Wall Street Journal. Netflix raises prices to pay for big spending is another story. You can follow also inside the Wall Street Journal. A quick look now at the editorial cartoons, just to get a snippet of what they've drawn for us today. Let's begin with what is on the editorial page of the People Daily. And this is what Stano has drawn for us today. They have been smashed. These are the terrorists, Kenya and bowed. And we can also try and see what has been drawn by Victor in the star. And this is it. Kenya unbowed, right? And you can see the flag of Kenya there. Victory over terrorism. Let's try and see also what has been drawn inside the Standard. And I can actually lift that from my laptop because it's a bit corrupted. But this is what Stano, not really Stano, but Gado has drawn today in the Standard. If you may pick up that by director Arnold. This is what has been drawn by Gado. Right, we'll actually try and give it for you, or give it to you much, much later in the course of the program. But this is your splash today. We're still here on the front page of the Daily Nation. Right, you can grab a copy of the Daily Nation or whichever paper that really floats your boat. But for now, let's swing for the fences by looking at the highlight. The government declares victory against 14 Riverside Drive terrorists. In Zimbabwe, scores arrested, beaten as Zimbabwe police crack down on protests. And the British Prime Minister Theresa May government wins no confidence vote. Now, families bearing the scars of the attack continue to grieve the loss of their loved ones, even as they gathered at Chiromo Funeral Parlor to identify the bodies of their loved ones. Emotions flowed freely as the reality of what had happened hit home and hit hard. Charity Mwangi starts us off.
At the Chiromo Funeral Parlor, the cries of broken and bruised families tore into an otherwise silent mourning. These families are just a part of a sea of distraught faces of others that had gathered at the morgue for any news of their loved ones.
Well, the news came to us as a shock because we expected to find him alive. When we had the blast, the dad talked to him just when the blast happened. But after that, when everybody tried to contact him, the phone was off.
It's been a long day and night since they first heard the news of an incident that will scar them forever. The grim aftermath of a gun attack that has torn these families apart.
How would you feel as a parent when your son tells you, I'm in the midst of terrorists? How would you feel? I felt the same thing that you would have felt as a parent.
So when I came, I tried reaching him again. He was still unavailable.
The horror that was unfolding at the Dusit complex turned to crippling grief for those starting to come to terms with the reality of what really happened. Through the survivors, the stories of the pitiless carnage have emerged, the tales of how the gunmen without mercy. Through the survivors, the stories of the pitiless carnage have emerged, the tales of how the gunmen without mercy opened fire on civilians.
You can imagine someone breaking down the doors that you think are protecting you, and you hid under your desk. I mean, if they just look like that, they could just see your feet and they just kill you. So it was very traumatizing, it was very hard.
Melly's boyfriend had come to Kenya in search of love, but his dreams were never actual.
Actually, I never wanted to go into the school of thought that he's dead, because actually we've dated for 1 year, and actually his intention of coming to Kenya was to actually see me and see my mom at the same time. So apparently the mission it was not fulfilled.
Some, however, managed to salvage such beauty from the ashes. The attack brought shock and then defiance.
Now, tukisema terrorist, a terrorist does not have a religion. Wala hana rangi, hana kabila, hana dini, hana ideology. It is an international phenomenon which we have to confront all together. Kwa hiyo ninasema ya kwamba tumeumia wote pamoja, na tafadhalini tushikane pamoja na tukae pamoja kwa amani na tuwafuate wale watu ambao wametufanyia hiyo mambo.
It happened, and you know, the discrimination which was being done to the Somali community, let's just say the Muslim community as a whole, was really, really bad, really bad. I personally have an ID, but when a police sees me, he doesn't care about the ID, he sees me as a terrorist. But how can I be a terrorist? We have our lands here in this country, the whole of Northern Frontier District. We live there, that's our land. How can you say I'm not a Kenyan?
Officials here at the Chiromo mortuary are still conducting post-mortem examination on some of the bodies, with the exercise expected to spill over to tomorrow. We have, however, seen some of the families already transporting their family members for burial. Charity Mwangi, NTV.
And police have arrested 2 suspects believed to be behind the Dusit complex attack. The suspects are reported to have been arrested in Isili, Nairobi County, and Mochadha, Kiambu County. One of the key suspects has been identified as Ali Salim Gishunge, aka Farouk, who together with his wife lived at a house number E09 in Gwango Estate, Mochadha. NTV has also established that the 2 had advertised to sell off their house wares and furniture at throwaway prices. Leila Mohammed has more.
With the use of social media sites like WhatsApp, many Kenyans are now realizing that the Nyumba Kumi initiative is now becoming a key figure in ensuring that criminal activities are something they can pick out amongst those who live in their own communities. It is in the leafy suburb of Gwango in Mochadha village, Kiambu County, that Ali Salim Gishunge chose to live with his young wife. The 2 living a largely quiet life here, and while there was conflicting information about how social they were with their neighbors, many did not know what was happening at this compound around 8 p.m. Tuesday when ATPU officers raided the home and took away what they believe will be key evidence. In the estate's WhatsApp group, residents who recognized the vehicle number plates at 14 Riverside Drive reached out seeking to know if the owner and his family was a resident and whether they were safe. But as the events began to unfold, it became apparent the enemy could have been within.
Yeye kwa vile hata siishi hapa, lakini shughuli zake yeye alikuwa anakuja tu kwa nyumba yake, anaingia alafu anatoka. Hakukuwa na shughulika sana na wenyeji wa hapa, na hata hakuna mtu alikuwa anajua ile kazi anafanya.
It is only after police officers had raided the house that 2 telephone numbers 0704 407 153 and 0723 083 391 were kicked out of the WhatsApp groups. Upon further investigations, NTV has established that the duo had on Monday the 14th of January placed an ad on Facebook page Nairobi Moms Marketplace under the name Junior Red. The couple was selling household stuff and clothing at about 100,000 shillings. The ad was accompanied by a telling message, quote, "We are moving out of Nairobi this week, so it's a quick sale. Prices slightly negotiable," end quote. The whereabouts of Farouk are unknown, but according to neighbors, his young bride could be in custody together with another person who was arrested Wednesday. Another car was found in the compound. Meanwhile, in Athi River, police are holding another vehicle bearing similar plate numbers to the one that was involved in an attack. The vehicle was found parked in New Valley area of Kitengela. According to residents, the owner of the vehicle has lived there for only 1 month. Leila Mohammed, NTV.
Deputy President William Ruto is among leaders who have comforted the victims of the attack. ODM leader termed it a cowardly act aimed at causing fear and panic. This is how leaders reacted to the attack.
Our very deep and sincere condolences to those who have lost their loved ones. We have come to see the victims of the attack in this hospital, and many of them have now been discharged, and the rest are still here. They are receiving medical attention. The surgeries have been performed, and the doctors are very happy with the progress that they are making in the treatment that has gone on.
If the intention of the terrorists is to try to intimidate and cow the people of Kenya. They are dialing a wrong number. The people of Kenya will not be cowed by this kind of dastardly act of violence. This actually helps to fortify our unity as a people. And our people must stand strong together.
Let us ensure that we are our neighbor's keeper. With that, we pray that the Nyumba Kumi initiative is rejuvenated to ensure that Kenyans are vigilant and responsive to what happens around them.
We strongly condemn the barbaric and criminal tactics of perpetuating acts of violence against innocent people. We reiterate that these actions are unacceptable, immoral, and inconsistent with any human values and ethos.
The international community has also joined in and condemned the terrorist attack. The U.S. Embassy, which says it was closely monitoring the developments, said it had actively offered assistance to local authorities. One American was killed. British High Commissioner Nick Haley confirmed one British citizen was among those killed and will support the affected families. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres termed the attack as a horrible terrorist act and joined in expressing solidarity with the Kenyan people. The South African High Commission also sent a message of condolence to the bereaved. The German embassy says it stands by Kenya in its fight against radicalization and terrorism. The Nairobi Security Exchange remained stable a day after the attack at 14 Riverside Drive. Stakeholders in the private sector have come out to condemn the attack at the Dasit complex, terming it an act of cowardice. Among others, umbrella bodies in the manufacturing and retail sector have decried the incident and called upon the country not to allow the development to derail the economy. Julius Amboko has more.
Kenya's economy is not a stranger to the adverse effects of terror attacks. Between 2013 and 2014, the attractiveness of the business environment was significantly undermined by recurrent incidences of attacks. This explains why yesterday's attack has attracted significant interest from players in the private sector. The Kenya Association of Manufacturers was one of the first to issue a statement and had this to say.
The statement says the association condemns the attack and applauds the solidarity demonstrated by Kenyans in these dark times.
Operators of malls and other retail outlets have also been equally concerned about yesterday's attack and have moved to allay fears of consumers of security deterioration in their various outlets. This is what the umbrella body had to say about the state of security in this particular ventures.
We have confirmed with our members operating from various malls across the country that mall management have, in light of these events, reviewed security operations in conjunction with the police and all other partners to ensure secure environments for the safety of retailers and the public. The Kenya Private Sector Alliance has also added its voice to this condemnation, saying, the private sector generates jobs, taxes to pay for public healthcare services and to help meet the costs of educating our children. Attacking the private sector through terrorism imperils our futures. End of quote. This view has been shared by the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, KNCCI.
Yesterday's attack notwithstanding, a number of macro indicators suggest the Kenyan economy is holding on resiliently. At both the Nairobi Securities Exchange and the Forex market, there was little to suggest investors were getting jittery about the state of the economy.
The NSE 20 share index closed today's trade at 2,844 points, posting a slight gain from yesterday's close, with investors reporting a gain of 19 billion shillings in paper wealth, as reflected in the market capitalization.
The attack at 14 Riverside comes at a time when Kenya's tourism industry was rebounding and the country was attracting favorable ratings in the World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index. Going forward, investors will be hoping that such incidences will be mitigated and the environment will remain stable for the medium to long term. Julius Amboko, NTV.
Now, scores of Zimbabwean civilians, including a prominent activist, were detained and charged with public violence on Wednesday, and others were beaten, lawyers and witnesses said, pointing to a heavy crackdown on dissent by security forces. Outside a private hospital in Harare, Reuters talked to two men seeking treatment for wounds sustained on Tuesday night. One said soldiers smashed their way into his house and dragged him to an open space where he and around 20 other people were beaten and accused of being protesters. Police said they had arrested more than 200 people following the protest. 3 people, including a police officer, died in violent demonstrations on Monday. There was no immediate government comment on the series of arrests or allegations of violence by police and soldiers. Protesters also gathered outside Zimbabwean embassy in South Africa's capital of Pretoria, condemning detentions and demanding internet services and telephone connections to be brought back after they were cut on Tuesday so they could communicate with their relatives in Harare. Wednesday was the third and final day of a stay-at-home protest called by unions in response to President Emerson Mnangagwa's increasing the price of fuel by more than 150%.
Now are going to beating people in the identity area. So we as Zimbabwe living in South Africa, we can't be quiet about it. So we came to our embassy just to ask them to send our message to Zimbabwe, to agree to allow the network to come on so that we can communicate with our relatives. We don't even know what's happening to our relatives now. It's their right to communicate. They have right to communication. So this communication, this internet should be opened with immediate effect.
An international criminal court judges have rejected a prosecution request to extend the custody of former Ivorian leader Laurent Gbagbo following his acquittal on charges of crimes against humanity. After the hearing, a group of his supporters celebrated outside the ICC court, some chanting Gbagbo is leaving, waving Ivorian flags or drinking champagne. Standing among the former African leader's supporters, Laurent Gbagbo's daughter, Marie-Laurence Gbagbo, said she did not know how long it would take before the paperwork and all the documents that will allow her father's release are issued. Other supporters said the court case against Gbagbo was a result of an international plot against him and called the 73-year-old man who headed their former French colony for over 10 years a symbol of African sovereignty. Judges said Gbagbo had given assurances he would return to the Hague-based court if ordered to do so. Prosecutors said they will appeal the decision and that there could be a retrial, but the panel of judges said the defendants could no longer be held in custody following their acquittal. Nigeria's main opposition candidate for president says he will seek to privatize the state oil company and other government assets if elected next month, while removing a costly petrol subsidy to revive the economy. Atiku Abubakar, a businessman who served as vice president between 1999 and 2007, has promised to double the size of Nigeria's economy to $900 billion by 2025. He is a main challenger to President Muhammadu Buhari in the February 16th election. Nigeria's oil-dependent economy, which vies with South Africa's to be the largest in Africa, has performed below par since 2016, when it suffered its first recession in 25 years. With unemployment at 23.1% in the third quarter of 2018 and inflation at a 7-month high of 11.44% in December, the economy has become a key election issue. British Prime Minister Theresa May's government has won a vote of no confidence with 325 votes versus 306. The vote means that May will now press ahead with talking to lawmakers from all parties to try to find a consensus of how to proceed with Britain's departure from the European Union after her proposed deal was rejected by Parliament.
Order, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased that this House has expressed its confidence in the government tonight. I do not take this responsibility lightly, and my government will continue its work to increase our prosperity, carry guarantee our security and to strengthen our union. And yes, we will also continue to work to deliver on the solemn promise we made to the people of this country to deliver on the result of the referendum and leave the European Union. I believe this duty is shared by every member of this House, and we have a responsibility to identify a way forward that can secure the backing of the House. To that end, I've proposed a series of meetings between senior parliamentarians and representatives of the government over the coming days. And I would like to invite the leaders of parliamentary parties to meet with me individually, and I would like to start these meetings tonight. Mr. Speaker, the government approaches these meetings in a constructive spirit, and I urge others to do the same. But we must find solutions that are negotiable and command sufficient support in this House. And as I've said, we will return to the House on Monday to table an amendable motion and to make a statement about the way forward. The House has put its confidence in this government. I stand ready to work with any member of this House to deliver on Brexit and ensure that this House retains the confidence of the British people.
And Britain's former Prime Minister David Cameron says he has no regrets over calling the June 26 referendum, the results of which led him to resign as Prime Minister, and that he fully supports Prime Minister Theresa May after her Brexit deal was rejected in Parliament by a huge margin.
Tonight, I'm sure she will, and as I said, I hope then that Parliament can come together and find an alternative partnership agreement with the European Union. That's the right way forward. That's what her deal was about last night, and she has my support as she does this.
Do you regret calling the referendum?
I don't regret calling the referendum. It was a promise I made 2 years before the 2015 general election. It was included in a manifesto. It was legislated for in Parliament. I think 6 out of 7 members of Parliament of all parties voted for that referendum. Obviously, I regret that we lost that referendum. I deeply regret that. I was leading the campaign to stay in the European Union. And obviously I regret the difficulties and the problems that we've been having trying to implement the result of that referendum. But I don't think it's going to be helped by me giving a running commentary. I support the Prime Minister. I support her aim to have a partnership deal with Europe. That's what needs to be put in place. That's what Parliament needs to try and deliver now. And she has my support as she tries to do that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir.
Right, we want to buckle down to a discussion this morning. Remember, you're watching In the Market here on AM Live, and today we're focusing on security and business. And Kenya and its people have witnessed a surge in terrorist attacks and violent extremism, of course, recent one being the Dusit D2 complex. The impact of this have been mostly felt on infrastructure, physical and human capital, productivity and economic growth. Furthermore, terrorist attacks and violent extremism have increased uncertainty in the investment climate, disrupted household spending and livelihood, dissuaded foreign direct investment, and led to reallocation of resources from growth-enhancing investment to spending designed to increase national security. Today we look at the effects of terrorism and violent extremism on the tourism sector, foreign direct investment, and the Nairobi Security Exchange, effects on resource allocation and economies of counties. And also looking at the Business Daily today, this is how also the Nairobi Security Exchange fared. NSE defies terror attack, gains 19 billion shillings in a day. Stock market hits a 3-month high while shilling holds steady in fast trading session after Al-Shabaab strike. And that story is tucked away on page 4 of the Business Daily. Allow me to introduce our panelists this morning who will walk us through this particular discussion. Of course, also you get to drive the show with me. You can head over to our Twitter handle, which is AM Live NTV. AM Live NTV is a profile name on Facebook, and 20686 our SMS portal. We have with us this morning Mr. Silvanas Sebe, who is a KEPSA Security, KEPSA Security Sector Board member. Also, he is a director of PSRA. And we have Willie Kimani, who's the chair of RITRAC, which is a Retail Trade Association of Kenya. We have also with us the vice chair of Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. This is James Mureo. We do have with us as well Dr. Collins Odote, who is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi, also a columnist with the Business Daily. And we have the founder and CEO of Optiven, Group. This is George Washuhuri joining us this morning as well. We are focusing on security and business, and we just want to hear from our panelists this morning their reaction, of course, since we saw what has happened or what happened at the Dusit, and many lives were claimed there, which now has risen to 21, according to the information that it is the information filtering into a studio, of course, this morning as well. Let's just begin with Mr. Sewe on that particular front, and the debate that has come to the fore as well, and we'll be actually looking deeper into it, is about the private sector being armed as well. But first, your reaction when you had this particular attack, where were you?
Thank you, Debarl, for the invite. First of all, let me start by passing my condolences to the families who lost their loved ones. I was sort of directly affected in the sense that James Odur, on 26th of December, we had a football match where we were encouraging young youth back at our rural place, that is in Siaya, Game County. So less than 20 days, he's no more. In line with this, let me also thank the security agencies for a well-coordinated approach to the incident that took place. It was perfectly coordinated compared to the previous incidents that we had previously. And I thank the Cabinet Secretary, the Inspector General, and specifically the DCI for being or providing leadership in person on the 18 hours when the incident was being managed. And the President actually really provided actual leadership by making sure that the country is calm. I'll not forget to thank the media. What you are seeing being displayed in Business Daily is courtesy of the media, because terrorism is all about publicity. This time we won it. They never achieved what they intended at the end of the day, and I hope and believe that Kenyans will keep and continue the same spirit. When the incident took place, I was a little bit far, but I was in the office, at my office at Nasiko Plaza, and when we had it, it came as a surprise, because you have been enjoying relative calm, especially in the business community at the end of the day. But we are saying, we are grateful that all the agencies involved responded positively, including most of the engagements that we have been doing behind the scenes with the government agencies worked positively well. And I congratulate all the government agencies at the end of the day.
Thank you. Let's hear from also Willie Kimani. You gave a statement yesterday, and also the Kenya Chamber of Commerce did that as well. Your reaction, please.
Well, first is to condole with the victims and also wish a quick recovery to those who are in hospital.
Yes.
It's quite an unfortunate happening. Again, also, I'm known to Jason Spindler, who is the CEO of IDEV, a great American who has actually spent the last 3 or 5 years trying to bring in investment and in both in retail and hospitality industries, successfully in 2 fronts. On the same, someone who comes in on a day-to-day basis to try and just build up. We also have very many of our suppliers who are actually housed there. Reckitt Benckiser, Colgate, we have Visa, LG, people who actually we interact with on a daily basis, and their work is to make sure that retail traders are actually able to move. On the day we were actually having what we call a commercial meeting at the Naivas head office, and we had to cut short the meeting because at this particular point now it was actually trying to ensure that the various retail outlets and malls and everybody just upped their game to ensure that we are quite stable and to ensure that nothing happens, yet we can see that there is definitely something ongoing. Over and above that, to say thank you to PS Trade, who actually took up a very active role, calling us and also giving us information on what the different government agencies are actually doing towards the same.
Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry also gave a statement yesterday. Let's just hear a reaction also from you, James Mreo.
Yeah, thank you. I join my colleagues in first of all condoling the families that lost loved ones and those who are recovering in hospitals. We want to really wish them quick recovery and then just say that Kenya is unmoved by this cowardly act. As a business community, I think we are cognizant of the fact that these terrorists don't come knocking at the door. They come through all manner of routes. They come through the roof. They come through holes that they make through the walls. They don't come through the door. And so we issued a statement yesterday supporting what the government has done, supporting the forces that moved in very swiftly. And clearly, this is a departure from what we saw in Westgate. This was swift, precise, and
quick off the mark.
Quick off the mark, and they were able to really just deal with the menace precisely, and that's why we saw graphics of all the terrorists that were gunned down, which means we have actually achieved the objective of this government's intention to deal with the menace. Having said that, as a business community, of course, we've not been able to assess the absolute loss, but we know there is loss, but we can start by assessing the loss of lives. 21 lives are important lives in our country. And so I think going forward, the only way to subdue these terrorists and to make them feel that they have not achieved what they thought they would is to forge ahead with determined resolve, to continue doing what we're good at every day of our lives, and to do our businesses, and we as a business community to continue doing what they're good at as best as they can. Just word of caution, this is time also to be very careful about who you see coming in, and the casual behavior that we see with the private guards as you go into these hotels. I'm sure these people, if somebody was vigilant enough, they probably would have been thwarted early enough, because all the cars have to stop. I know the entry to Deceit. There's a place way away from the main entrance where they do a physical check of the car. So these cars must have come through there. But somebody, I mean, this casual behavior, and I've seen private guards that just go around and he's talking and he's looking. Now it's time to up that game and really be vigilant, because you can spot people armed with all this fire power and stop them at that. If there is any explosion, then let it take place before it gets in the hotel. But I cannot bring myself to understand how these people just went through that process, because it's like a tunnel you go through, and you cannot go to Dusit without going through the first police check and the second one. And in all this, I think the big blame is on those who were watching, because you're told not to take anything for granted. So if you see anything suspicious, I mean, these guys were armed. They didn't dress inside the hotel. What we are seeing as pictures of these terrorists really were people who left their homes, got into a car, they had surveyed, and they knew the laxity with which this particular security check had, and they exploited the gap that was there. So it's a very unfortunate situation. I was on my way to a meeting when this happened, and we sort of got back and had to sit on our TVs and see what's happening, and then we issued a statement really asking the country to stay together, and the international community particularly not to issue travel advisories, because this is a global phenomenon that must be dealt with by everybody. So this is the time for our friends and development partners to stand together with us, not to issue travel advisories.
Right, let's hear from Dr. Collins Odote.
Morning, Debarl.
Morning to you.
And I think I join my colleagues too in condoling with those who lost their loved ones, and also those who are injured. We wish them quick recovery. For me, Dusit is a personal place for two reasons. One is, as a teacher at the university, our halls of residence for some of the students just borders Dusit. Students at Chiromo stay very near 14 Riverside Drive, and it was extremely traumatizing for them. So the second is 6 years ago, when 14 Riverside Drive was just starting to operate, I operated in some office there for like around 3 years. So I know several of the people who are there. So it's extremely, I think, a personal experience. But having said so, I think we need to thank God. We need to thank God for his mercies for us as a country, because this was completely unexpected, and he was very kind to us. Second, like everybody else, the response of the security agencies was extremely amazing. If you compare to 5 years ago and see what happened 2 days ago, you would not even know, except for the events happening, that we were in the middle of a terrorist attack. They were extremely professional, they were extremely calm. Vehicles could still drive in certain direction. Even when you're being diverted, you were diverted in such a humane manner. So I think we really need to commend our security agencies for the reform they have undertaken. because I think they learned their lessons. They didn't go to the town shouting about it, but we saw the evidence yesterday, and I think that's the way to go about everyone's life. Lastly, Debarl, I think we also need to thank citizens of Kenya. The response that citizens have, not just in their humane manner, but in their responsibility. The amount of effort people went through just to ensure that we don't display images, we don't spread panic, we go on with our life, I think is extremely nice. And to cap it all, to see the media reports today of celebrations, not because of the event, but celebrations because of our triumph over those events. I think that is the kind of commitment that we need to have as a country, so that when we are faced with this kind of dangers, we are able to overcome them, because it's only through that spirit that we'll be able to defeat these heinous acts of terrorism.
Thank you.
That's my quick response.
Thank you. George Washington, good morning.
Morning, viewers. And, you know, personally, I learned about the incidents when we were doing our Optiven strategic plan, and it was a bit disheartening, just to say that we had 3 years of peace. And as my colleague said, we saw a lot of a positive response from the population. You know, people are being corrected, rebuked when they share photos that are not necessary. And we saw a lot of patriotism among Kenyans. And of course, we saw very nice, fast response from our security forces. And as business community, I think we have a role to play, so that we are able to assist all the authorities that are looking at reducing the risk of terrorism. And I fully support the Nyumba Kumi initiative, because we need to know our neighbors. Immediately that happened, we got a circulation.
Yes.
For us who are managing houses for people, we were told, you must know your tenants, you know, full details. And we did a report that if you have people living in your house, you have to know them, you have to know their details, because these people are not foreigners, the terrorists. One of them is from my own county, Nyeri. You know, the other one is from Kiambu. That means these are young people, 29 years old, that have been indoctrinated, and they believe that what they're doing is right. So as a community, as a people, we have to do something, especially more to our youth. And we are encouraged. We are going to do what we can as business community, and also as a people living in our respective villages, to ensure that we know what our brothers and sisters are doing, because these are people with families. And once we do that, as total 48 million Kenyans, we can be able to reduce this risk of terrorism.
Right, thank you. Right, we want to take a short break right now, but when we circle back, of course, we get granular with our discussion, security and business. Where are the lapses as far as getting into the premises is concerned, and what are we learning from this, and what remedial action actually will be taken moving ahead, so that we can have a proper tight security when it comes to business premises as well. You know what to do. You can head over to our Twitter handle, which is AMLiveNTV. Also, AMLiveNTV is a profile name on Facebook, and 20686 our SMS portal. So let's get also your rush of tweets going, so that we can also be driving the show together. And also, when we have and we're banding our thoughts together, we can know what to do moving ahead. Thank you. Don't go away. that the Nairobi Security Exchange remained resilient. That is the stock market, despite the fact that, yes, this happened. We know previously that market has been spooked when we have such barbaric acts from terrorism. And we continue with our conversation with our panelists here who are in the business sector mostly. And of course, also we try and see how we can secure our businesses. Now, let's try and get deeper now because of interest of time and move quickly. First of all, we've seen these complexes and malls. They are the targets where terrorists, put a particular intent to actually perpetrate the barbarism and, of course, the terrorist act that we've seen so far. What are we learning from this so far? We could begin with you, Willie Kimani, because, yeah, we saw what happened with the Nakumatt. That was a very extensive, claiming of life through the barbaric act of terrorism because they knew this is where people are holed up. So in terms of coming with proper, alleys of escape, are we learning anything from there? And what is also RITRAC doing to make sure that security is enhanced when it comes to, making sure that people are properly secure within their premises?
Yeah, one of the first things we have to agree is that we have to have what we call uncomfortable but necessary security checks. To be honest, we've checked 6-7 years down the line. You're just walking into a supermarket, you're walking into a mall. There was not that much. And you also have to give it that we're talking about militants coming in with grenades and guns, and they're actually coming face to face with someone armed with nothing else but a metal scanner. And the first blast, most probably the thing he'll do is actually just to run away. Mm-hmm. If you look at the terrorists and the pictures splashed around their lifestyle items, those are items they actually bought in retail outlets and everywhere. So they're actually coming in there as guests, learn how to go in, and all those things. So we are talking about people who are planned to definitely come in, and that's why the most critical thing becomes the reaction during an active shooting activity. Mm-hmm. And evacuation becomes a very critical element of just knowing, hey, if you are retailers and you've had gunshots, what will be your first reaction to the shoppers that you have? Do you shut down your store and start telling people to exit through the receiving bays or the service zones, or do you switch off the lights, or do you do what? How do you exactly get in? And that's what we actually have been doing. Luckily, National Gun Owners Association had actually approached us on training specific to this, and at least it was done in 3 malls that I'm actually familiar with. You also saw Village Market had done a drill. You've seen Westgate doing their drills, and also in the smaller retailers. So meaning the most important on that particular point is how to actually do that evacuation and actually the immediate reaction next to it, so as to minimize the exposure to the shoppers and the people within the malls. So the key learning here is training has to be there. What happens when you hear the first shot? What should you be do? Are you switching on your lights and just leaving the emergency lights, or are you, if the people are already within you, for example, they will try as much as possible to go to the anchor tenants, because that's where the masses are anyway. And that's why the reason and importance, because everybody has a service lane on the other side. And actually something to encourage most shoppers as you actually shop to just notice the other end, the exits. Where do these goods come from? Because they never come in from the entry side. So this is actually your possible options, and then just have our people, because of the people who work in the mall, they know the mall every day. They know which is the nearest exit to the place, just to sensitize the people working in different retail outlets to be able to quickly evacuate and know the next steps necessary to actually take when something happens.
But when we have maybe such incidences, we'll find there could be a stampede, because also the escape routes coming from supermarkets and where we have the critical mass as well, they're not as plenty, and we can't see any emergency doors. I don't know if you've gone to a supermarket, we see in case of fire, in case of an act of terrorism, this is the escape route, and this actually, the way you've actually also made the alleys, maybe there's a footpath, route that you can show, leading people to the emergency exit routes. So in such cases, what then do we do? Because all of them, they will assemble where we have the tellers and maybe where you have the barcode scanners, but that can also lead to another crisis as well.
Yeah, and that's the importance of why training the particular, because the first respondent who is actually there is there's a staff, the staff working within these retail organizations. We also have a lot of exit marks. If you just go into the supermarket, you'll actually notice the exit. It's quite good to actually start noticing those the exit signs that are actually within. Yeah, exit, staff entry, because those at that particular moment there's no staff entry. It's an issue of, can you guide the customers who are actually there with you? This is the route to. This is actually the best possible route to actually exit the mall.
No, thank you. Let's just hear from Asewe, maybe on this as well. You can actually comment, because I know you've gone to the supermarkets and you've seen the way also the layout is. What will be your take, and what will you want maybe enhanced in terms of security, you coming from the security sector?
Vimal, I mean...
you wish. Vimal, okay. When you grew up. You're baptizing me now today.
No, when you grew up.
Let us appreciate that there's a gap.
Yes.
And the gap is very clear. And let us also appreciate that there is always room for improvement. Yeah. According to what we witnessed in the last incident that happened 2-3 days ago. And the gap is this, Debarl. Debarl. Sorry for that.
Inea for ease of remembrance.
Okay. Most of our security agencies have been trained to protect government security buildings. The interest that is coming out as a target nowadays is commercial buildings which are being owned by private entities. As KEPSA, we have identified the gap, and we're already engaging the government to pass what we are calling the Critical Infrastructure Protection Bill. Remember, we have a high number of corporate security personnel, specifically guarding these particular facilities, working alongside private security guards at any given moment. And we'd also like just to bring to your attention that the private security guards who are manning that particular building, one of our members can't account for 2 of his staff who are providing security services in that particular complex at the moment. So that particular bill which we are discussing with the National Assembly is to bring ease of coordination between the private security players and the national security agencies. And it also creates a room which is being championed by the Private Security Regulatory Authority of how to train people specifically on how to handle security-related threats within a private entity. Remember, the complicity is very simple. When you're talking about government buildings, the ones which have been classified and listed under the Protected Areas Act, there is always a reason for you to make sure that you fully identify yourself before you enter into those particular premises. But when it comes to commercial entities, then it becomes a bit complex, because there is the element of the business. Your customers would not like to be subject to 100% security checks, because if you go to that particular direction, then you might end up losing. Yes, it is a fact that we must make sure that we create awareness so that members of the public are told that, yes, it's unnecessary, but for a good cause. But how long will it take? Because business also have to continue at the end of the day. So that bill is trying to address that particular component. Then another thing that we are discussing with the ministry is the CCTV policy.
CCTV policy.
Remember that all those images which were being shared in the social media, and I also see media houses sharing it, it becomes a bit complex for the judicial system to use it, because they are not very clear to positively identify somebody. Because what has happened with the installation of the CCTV is that they are not professionally being fitted into the systems. Because this bill that we are discussing is demanding that any enterprise that needs to make sure that it comes up with the CCTV system must also have a security risk assessment plan, so that we know which camera belongs where and what can it capture, and a well-designed control room which will be manned 24/7. I was just trying to imagine within myself. These terrorists were being told that they had several visits to that particular hotel. At one point, if the system was well connected and interconnected with the command and control center, we should be able to see the trend of how those people came by playing back. If you look at most of the CCTV system, even storage itself is a challenge at the end of the day. Some of them store for 3 days, some of them for 10 days, then they erase it, which is even against what is required in electronic evidence management. So all these things we are discussing behind the scenes. And in line with the training, I must commend the National Counterterrorism Training Center, which have closely partnered with KEPSA. And we have trained not less than 1,000 members of KEPSA on awareness, especially when this incident comes across.
Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you. Let's hear from Mr. Mureo on this as well. The layout of the supermarket, what he's saying with the CCTV policy, the critical infrastructure bill. We'd love to know what also is embedded in this particular bill, if at all you're privy to this particular bill yourself.
First of all, let me say I'm not privy, but I will probably consult with KEPSA. But before I make my remarks, let me just applaud one hero in here, Grace Wambui. Yesterday morning took food to the security team at Dusit, and we saw a picture of her, and I was touched that really Kenyans just came out. Just food alone was in itself a very patriotic deed. But coming back to this issue of whether or not we have done enough, or whether or not we are addressing this issue of terrorism, we must first of all start by addressing the fact that we are a target country. We know we are living with the terrorists next door. So everything that is done must be geared towards averting that crime. And I want to tell Kenyans today that you must, every day, when you wake up, wear the criminal's mind. Even as you go through the supermarkets, even as you go to your office, even as you go home, you must have the criminal's mind. And remember, as you get to your entrance of your house, are you alert to the fact that there could be gangs waiting for you? When you go to the supermarket, as Sebe has said, the first thing is to look at which are the emergency escape routes. Unfortunately, if you look at the way our institutions are developed, are designed, the exit route is most likely where the terrorists are coming through. So really then we must relook at this and say, can we have a secret route that we know this is the conventional way they are going to come in, but we now want to evacuate through another route, and make sure this is known, so that, and that is what should be most secure, because in case of any problem, then that's where we will escape from.
Yes.
But having said that, then let's also look at what could we have done better. And me, I stand for the fact that, first of all, it starts with myself. Security starts with myself. And thereafter, the private security guards who man the barriers there. The first barrier that you've put is where you must detect these terrorists. And if it's not deterrent enough, then, and somebody is lax and is not able to manage that, then they get through the whole chain. And once they're inside there, then instead of preventing, now you start combating. So first, let's start by preventing and deterring these terrorists from getting in, accessing. The moment you do that, then you have scuttled their strategy. The second thing that I want to say is, in terms of security, my challenge goes to the private sector, private security providers. Have you trained? You can train everybody else, but really that basic training there at the entrance for the first line of defense is that security man who should have seen with your eyes. You don't need, and if you are to sacrifice, and I say this with the cheek in the tongue, sacrifice one person who has seen and alerted everybody else. Even if it's panic buttons, alarm bells goes off and everything, and there's chaos, and the terrorists don't like that. But if you are so casual, you look, okay. And most of the terrorists now, okay, this time they used a small car. But I've walked through supermarkets with a firearm. And they say, Mkubwa Peter. There's no Mkubwa. Because these terrorists then study that market. And they know that this is what you're going to do. So he comes dressed up nicely, and Mkubwa Peter. And he's actually armed inside. So we really must start by removing this question of who can go unchecked, who cannot go unchecked. So everybody must go through that. And we must wear the criminal's mind all the time, and no casual behavior about security. Even in our government, we must change that. Yes, the government installations are secure. Everybody, you can't go there. But why can't we do that and secure the private sector businesses? So I think for me, it's really a case of us as a country coming together and not going into the drawing board anymore. These bills should be priority. We should pass them on quickly and make sure that Kenyans are secure 24/7.
All right, thank you. Let us hear from Collins Odote on this as well. I don't know if you're privy to this critical infrastructure bill. Maybe also Mr. Sewe will just give us what is really codified there so that we can actually get a learning point. Is also the malls and the supermarkets captured in this critical bill? Let's hear from Dr. Odote.
No, I'm not privy to it, Debarl.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I will try and look at it after this. I would like to say a few things. I think the first thing that even as we discuss the challenges, if you read the reports, you will realize that there is at least some good thing that happened at Dusit, which is in terms of design.
Yes.
That if it wasn't for the fact that the doors could only be accessed by a card, if it wasn't for the foolproof manner in which it was designed, would have had much more casualties. I think we need to acknowledge the things that I've done well. The second is I want to be slightly fairer than Mureo for the private security guards. I don't think they're lax. I think they're neglected.
They're neglected.
And that is the bigger problem. They're neglected because for a long time, there's even been a lot discussed. We've been talking about how to ensure that some people even talk about arming, but I think the kind of protection that they are given, they're not given sufficient tools to do the work that they're doing. While I think the people talk about guns. For me, I think that's actually not even the first level of protection that they require. The first level of protection that they require, if you go to a lot of these places, your ordinary private security guard has been picked from somewhere, given a job, and invariably given nothing else except a uniform. Some don't even have a uniform. They don't. Very few of them have a whistle. Very few of them have training. Not that training of running around, which you see when they're being hired.
Exercises, the drills in the morning.
That's not training. That drill is insufficient. Exactly. And Mureo was right, when you drive in, there are times I ask myself, if these people actually discovered that you are carrying a bomb at the back of your car, what would they do? What do they actually do? They're actually checking with the hope you don't have, because that then makes life easy. But if you have, their first response will be to run away, because they are exposed without protection. And I think there are several things we need to do for them. The first thing that we need to do is to ensure that all people who run private security firms in this country there's a structured training process with minimum content, so that the work that the National Counterterrorism Center has been doing with KEPSA must be done with the owners of private security firms, so that there's minimum counterterrorism training that every guard who is hired goes through. The second thing that must happen is that there must be backroom linkages, so that they know, if I see this, who do I report to? Who do I respond to? Because not all of them will be able to afford an alarm. That we must accept. But is there even, if you ask some of the guards, do they even have the number of the first government security person to respond to? The answer is no. That is why when the events happen, you will see fake numbers circulating. Even in Dusit, there's a fake number that was circulating. The government had to say this is fake. It should be clear that, by the way, when you have this kind of threat, make this response. And we can even make it free, because sometimes somebody will not even have airtime. So that can then be the cost of the nation. That as a security person, you can make this call and then there's quick response. So for me, that's the kind of protection that we need to give these people. So that as a minimum, he knows that when I see this is what I can do. That's the first thing. The second thing that we need to do, and I think colleagues have spoken about it, we need to worry about the ordinary workers. When we do trainings, we focus on management. We focus on the business owners. Invariably, those business owners may not be there. What happens to your ordinary teller is critical for the survival of citizens. Does the ordinary teller know the kind of action to take? If you read the newspapers, I think it's Mureo who was saying that there is a lady who survived Westgate and survived yesterday. But for me, what struck me is that she was saying, I was able to use my experience from Westgate to do this. Even when I said the first things to my colleagues, they ignored me. It's only later that they took. And for me, that then tells you the benefit of training. And we need to ensure that that training is to ordinary workers. If you go to Riverside, I am sure that the bulk of the ordinary workers were not trained. And not Dusit, I'm saying the whole Riverside. The bulk of the ordinary workers were not trained. And we can make it easy. So if you have a big installation, then you can be able to organize, as the owner of that place, to organize some regular trainings for the residents of that place so that they have some basic knowledge. Then you know, we are talking about exits, and you see, unless there's a systematic training process, very many people, you go to a supermarket and you are interested in buying bread. Yeah, you will buy bread and run out. Sometimes you even want to do it quickly so that you don't spend too much money in terms of parking fees. So your priorities are different. But if we make this a deliberate effort, and I think several years ago when we had the last terrorist attack, the one in Garissa, there was even an effort to try and ensure that there's trainings even in schools, trainings in universities. The government started a process, but after a few hours, a few months, we left it. I think the one lesson we must learn is let's improve on what we've done. Our security forces were better this time. We must ensure that our trainings and responses are better into the future. The last thing, Debarl, for me is about the nature of our buildings. We must, if you take away from terrorism, you know, we've had fires in schools. And one of the critical challenges has always been how the windows are designed.
Yes.
And every time we say, we'll do a better job, but we don't. I think we need to worry about how our buildings are designed so that our buildings are designed so that they can be able to respond to emergencies. We have fire exits that are opened. We have windows that can be opened from the outside. Lastly, if you go to several government buildings and even private buildings, there are scanners which don't work. In critical places, if I mentioned critical government places, you'll be shocked. If you look at even the three arms of government, go to the buildings that house the three arms of government. You will find that in 2 out of 3, they don't work. Go to even the place that houses our real security. If you go, you'll find that as you're trying to get in through, you're told, that doesn't work, just get in. We need to avoid that so that we're sure we have scanners that work. Those are investments that we can't take for granted, so that we are much more prepared.
Thank you. Nature of our buildings, I think this is where, this is really right up your alley, George Washuri, because the issue of Nyumba Kumi initiative also is coming to bear on this particular discussion, because we didn't know our neighbors, and we saw also from the media, we could see the locality, also the premises where these people are living. No one actually knew this person was a terrorist. We don't really know our neighbor. And you're talking about negligence from the private sector. Also, I think also with Nyumba Kumi initiative has been neglected as well. Not enough funding. George.
Lessons learned. I think I saw somewhere that every attack that is done by these people, they also study and learn what to do next best. And for us citizens, we have also learned lessons. And one of the lessons, I think we need to empower the National Counterterrorism Authority. This is an authority that is working for them to do civic education, especially to the members of the public. We have seen when there's an explosion, everybody runs where the explosion is to see for themselves. So that is very dangerous, and our members of the public need to be educated, and maybe media can also be able to do that. And number 2, we can also monitor our digital media, social media. You know, one of the ladies, the wife to the terrorist on the social media, was called herself a friend of Shabab. So I think we need to keep monitoring and studying, researching on social media, because some of these trainings for our young people is happening on social platforms. So we need to, maybe the authority also to check, and also members of the public to check if you see something funny. We can have those free numbers whereby people can be able to report. Other than that, I think as individuals out there, you need to know your surroundings. If you go to shopping to a certain supermarket, know the surroundings. I read what happened in the Westlands. One of the guys was able to know where to go behind the door, and they jumped the fence, and they were able to survive. So it's important for us to know where we shop, where we go, so that in case of anything, not only Al-Shabaab or terrorism, but maybe in case of fire, you know how to escape and where to escape. So this information is important. Other than that, I think we have a role to play. Nyumba Kumi has a big role to play. And these people, we have them on social media, we have them on WhatsApp, and we somehow we can suspect. So I will ask Kenyans out there, the estates that you're living in, know your neighbor. let's not be there like the Western countries whereby you don't care about the next door. Know your neighbor next door so that we are accountable to each other.
All right. Nature of building, I think also we can piggyback where that is Willie Kimani. Just bring us to speed as well.
Just quickly comment on something just before it gets off on what my brother from the university said. I actually did not say the security guards are lax. They just have to be a bit more vigilant. Just use your eyes, even without these scanners. As soon as you see, if you frisk the car properly, you would be able to see. And the very least that the security guard should have is a panic button. And if they trigger a siren or something, then they'll be able to scuttle the plans of when the sirens blare and everything.
Yes.
Then these guys, the plan is thwarted. And I said with chicken tongue, if we have to lose one life at that, we save many others, if at all. I mean, you like you said, what will this guy do when he sees there's a bomb? Does he know how a bomb looks in the first place? You know, all that training really is
They will tell
important.
us what they've been training. So
Yes,
that now
yes,
he's here.
Does he know what a bomb looks like?
Yeah, he will tell us in a moment. Let's hear from Willie, the nature of buildings, and we can weigh in also on what our other panelists are saying, especially when it comes to the private security firms being neglected.
Yeah, there's a very fine line between security and actually bringing in traffic. Every retailer every day goes in wishing that he actually has increased traffic and increased basket value. You want, by that virtue, you mean you want people to spend as much as possible, and so the nature of the building needs to be welcoming and not a barrack. Yeah, because you want to actually feel, because I'm actually going in with my son, my daughter, and we're going to spend in time here. It's a whole ecosystem of banking, dining, shopping, and you need that environment without necessarily putting in a combative environment, and it's as if you're trying to sneak in into a barrack. That's what we are and every day trying to just increase traffic. So every mall is trying to compete with other mall for I have the better offering, service wise and all that. And so the nature of the building and the nature of any retail store on the facade should be completely welcoming and all that, and the level of security needs to be there. Let's be cognizant of the fact that the person who is supposed to be protecting us, we're supposed to be protecting that we do not even have any terrorists coming into the country. The national government is not supposed to be, we should actually be saying, yes, thank you very much for fast response, but the first and foremost thing is there should be no terror attacks happening. And so that level, and then the next level is actually saying, hey, if this is happening, because remember, if however much you'll actually arm that guard, these are people who have studied the mall, have studied the building, this will be the exit, this will be the what, so you will need now 4 or 5 or whatever they'll actually decide. The issue is, how do we handle when this starts? Quite first, the guards should actually alert. Second, when we alerted, what should we do, the next steps? But again, going back to the nature of the buildings, definitely exit plans are there, but you do not know where the person is starting. Is he on the exit? Is he starting on the entry? And all that. But definitely knowing and the person who is actually that. Because remember, today you're going to be shopping in this mall. The next day you're going to shop in the next mall. You will not know all those malls and there. But the people who work there, and investing in those people who work there, such that they actually know this is where to guide the masses when this happens, to reduce. Because however much you try, the core business of a retailer at that point is actually to sell, not the core role of government is to secure.
Yes.
So everybody should play his role.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Sewe, let's hear from you first of all. On the training that Mr. Mureu is raising. Yeah, in case now some of the guards, yeah, they happen to see an idea or bomb for that matter. What is the training that actually you have for these private guards?
Let us first of all appreciate that the government has done a lot. This is a sector that has been unregulated for so many years. But in 2016, the government passed Private Security Regulatory Act, a board which I sit in. That particular achievement should be appreciated because within that particular act of parliament, all these issues that we are trying to bring across are well taken care of, including creating institutions which are supposed to provide leadership in terms of transforming the private security industry. It's an industry that nobody can assume. Remember, it employs not less than 500,000 Kenyans at the end of the day. And we are saying there has to be a transform period. And you remember when we are talking to you, yesterday, I told you that we are supposed to be having a stakeholder meeting in relation to the same, because the authority is trying to sensitize the members, the stakeholders, the primary stakeholders, of what is expected to them for them to be in compliance with some of these things. One of them is training at the end of the day. This training must be in line with the requirement of all existing government agencies, NITA, TVET, and of course with the input of the authority and the industry players at the end of the day. What NCTC is doing, and is what Dr. has tried to bring across, is to create awareness. Actually, we are not only targeting, we have 3 levels in that particular training. Level 1, just to create awareness. You enter into a mall, an incident takes place, each and every person will be told which role he or she is supposed to play. And in experience with what that lady who was a victim in Westgate and whatsoever, the experience which she got, is what NCTC is trying to share with the people who might be found in that particular situation. Level 2 is targeting security players, be it a security guard, be it a security officer at the end of the day. Then level 3 is targeting the management. Remember, these things comes with a cost, and it has correctly been put. When you're investing in some of these security-related technological equipments, the senior management, if it's not cognizant of the importance, they'll tell you, and that's why Dr. is saying some of the equipments are not working. Because like now I can tell you, there will be a rush of making sure that people buy those particular equipments. But the problem will come in the cost of maintenance at the end of the day. When now the vendor comes and say we are supposed to maintain this and upgrade it, then you look at it and say, for the last 1 year we have not had any incident, so why should we do some of these things? And I can tell you, in terms of recognizing an ID and the rest, even if you go to national security organs, those trainings are not done to each and every officer. There is a class which is normally targeted at the end of the day. So we are also saying, yes, we need, and remember, the private security industry or sector has absorbed so many officers who used to work in the national security organs. Actually, they're the ones who are at the top cream at the end of the day. So we can't also rule out that they don't know some of these things. But we are saying a population of 500,000, yes, it will take time to do what? To make sure that it gives a difference. And this is where now we are engaging the Ministry of Interior so that the authority can be more proactive to make sure that the industry is transformed to meet what it wants. Lastly, on the issue of the fire, behind the scenes, once again, there is a bill that is almost in its final stages, the Disaster Risk Management Bill. And remember, we have regulations about fires in schools. But that regulation was passed when Dr. Matiang'i was the CS of Education, but nothing has been done to the same. So there are several things which are being done at that particular policy level. Lawyer keeps a seat, and we expect, for example, RITRAT has taken advantage of the training to a certain extent, and we are telling all members interested, and allow me to say, the trainings which are being offered by National Training Center in terms of awareness are being done free. But what does the targeted group say? We can't release our members because they can't account for that particular period. And they don't take even a day. Actually, awareness is taking half a day by some members. And that's why you see tourism has taken advantage of the same. And that's why they have been, and the members of the center travel as wide as possible within the country. And they won't ask even a single cent in terms of training. So a lot is being done.
Right. And I think we can also rope in the question of the private guards being armed as well, because I think this is a bigger question. And the Cabinet Secretary, for that matter, had given a thumbs up to the proposal from the National from the National Security Advisory Committee. But I don't know what really happened. Everyone is not really talking on the same page. Are they to be armed or are they not? I don't know what, Mr. Moreu, you will weigh in from the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce. I know many of them also are seeking to be armed, the private firms as well.
Yeah. Thank you very much. First of all, let me tell my brother, Sewe, you know you're doing so many nice things in KEPSA, but you're keeping them to yourselves. Unfortunately, if all of us are hearing this from the media here,
especially from the National Counterterrorism training that is free.
There's something that's not right. And I think this is what I was talking about. This information must be made public. Everybody must know that this is happening. When you're passing these bills, do you think Kenya National Chamber can contribute effectively? Are we not running so many businesses? I think there is a lapse that must be addressed. If we are private sector, Kenya Private Sector Alliance and Kenya National Chamber and all other business member organizations, we must work together, because what you're doing is good, but it's isolated, and we're not aware about this. If you're telling me that there's a free training that should be taken up by all supermarkets and other institution owners, then that information really can no longer be kept private to Kenya private sector, unless it's private to Kenya private sector. We've chipped in the tongue. But now you've raised another very interesting issue, that all the senior managers are trained in security. Can we then have them as the first line of defense? Because really the person that should be trained is right at the entrance, right at the beginning. If I was to train somebody at Dusit, the Chiromo Road entrance to Dusit is where the first line of defense. And like you've rightly said, if the supermarket is supposed to be a nice shopping place, you can free it if you check right at the beginning. Vigilance to a certain extent, and then once you go into the supermarket, it's free because that security has been taken care of. But if you now tell me that the managers are trained, for example, the receptionists who died there, if they all had panic button, and sirens that blare up, these terrorists get confused and they run away. But if you now tell me that you want guns, and you have told me that even the people who are trained to identify a bomb are not the first line of defense, so this guy comes with a funny look at me and says, and anapita. Then what is the use of all this training? Is it achieving its objective? And my answer is no. The last thing I want to say is, you know, when you look at, and this I'm speaking in support of, terrorists don't have a race, they don't have a color, they don't have a tribe, they don't have a religion. A bad person is a bad person. And I think it's up to every individual, every person in this country to be alert and alive to the fact that we have an enemy out there who is out to cause terror, pain. Because if you ask me, what was the objective of killing all these people? Nothing. They achieved nothing except cause pain and terror. And the other terrible thing, Debarl, is if you are dealing with a person whose mindset is to commit suicide, I've wrapped bombs around myself, I'm ready to die, then what are we talking about? This guy does not care. You can start shooting. His work is to explode himself, die, and so, again, we're dealing with a terrible person. If today there was an explosion, I'll start looking for, I'll leave you guys here and look for a place to hide. And one of the things I've done myself, Debarl, is when I go into the supermarket, because I'm conscious of that, as soon as I go in, I say, in case there is trouble, that bakery behind there, I can see, I've sort of identified, it's the worst kind of I've spotted a place where I can see, this is the last place these guys will fit. So I'll quickly go and scan the place and say, if something happens, the first place, as close as possible. And as I go through, you just keep saying, if under the staircase, where is covered, if you go underneath there, then chances are they'll pass there without seeing you. But we've got to be alive to the fact that we're living with these guys. They're right next door. The government has tried to secure the borders. The last thing is about our security agencies as we check through immigration. These people who come in, our visas are such that somebody comes in here, and that's why we have an influx of a lot of foreigners, because they come in, they're given a visa, nobody traces this visa. If you have an e-visa that can be traced and blips when it expires, then you start looking for this guy. What are you still doing in this country? But the guys come in, stamp, and this is a manual thing, and they go and disappear into the country. Can we tell how many non-Kenyans are in this country? How many illegal immigrants are in this country? We can't. And that is the first line of duty as far as the country is concerned. Right. They owe me the duty of protecting me.
We'll come to you. Let's just hear from Collins. Because essentially, yes.
I think we can't allow Sewe to get with the authority on which he sits. That authority for private sector guards authority, the law was passed in 2016, and it says a lot has been done. I think the trouble that we have in this country is where we think that solutions to problems is laws and policies. It is not the, and that's why even the critical infrastructure protection bill, it's not the passing of it that is the solution. The passing of it is the start of the issue. So it's about the implementation. And I think the authority has not sufficiently implemented SEO. And you must use this experience to do much better. Because the amount of training that is required, the amount of response that is required of our private security guards, and clearly the owners, I think we haven't done sufficient amount of work, and we need to do sufficient amount of work. I suspect part of the reason might be prioritization, part of the reason might be budgeting. But I think we must realize that there are key protection in terms of dealing with the terrorism into the future, because the bulk of the places, and terrorism, no, that they are our weakest link. We must move to a situation where they actually are able to identify IDs. Because these people actually scan. So you can't wait for somebody else to be there. That only a few people, they should have some basic knowledge about identification, not about how to deal with it. Every guard who is at the entrance must be able to, because they check us, they frisk. They must be able to know what they are looking for.
Yes.
The next thing they must know, once I have seen it, what do I do? I don't agree with Mureu that there should be sirens blaring all over, because when they do so, then definitely they'll be sacrificed. And I don't think we should put out any category of citizens to be sacrificial lambs. Nobody will agree to be that sacrificial lamb unless you want to go and join Al-Shabaab. So I think we must be able to deal with it in such a way that is much more effective. I think the last issue is what Willie said about buildings. Yes, Willie, that buildings are supposed to be welcoming, but I think we must admit that except for the big installations, a lot of the other mid-level things focus too much on welcoming and not on the security implications. And I think we must be able to say, using this experience, we must move from beyond just the big malls to ensuring that almost the majority of the malls have the levels may differ, but at least there's a basic level of security that is put into place. That you say this is the minimum that's accepted. Going to training, I think we can't reach a situation where people in big infrastructure have the option of whether they go to training or not. That training must be mandatory.
Yes.
And there are very many ways of doing it. That as part of renewing your license, you must demonstrate that your workers have gone for training. If you're working in health facilities or in food places, you will have a health certificate for your workers. They don't have, there's no renewal of licenses. So the same way, if you are running a big mall, we should be saying that unless you're able to demonstrate that you've gone for this training for your staff, then you will not renew your license. What is even better is that training is free. So it costs you nothing. So you have no excuse for not going for it. That way, we'll be able to increase the levels of responsibility for all of us as citizens.
Right.
We didn't like ourselves. Very few of us like to be frisked initially. The first time it started, very few of us like to be frisked. But because of the increasing awareness raising, people now know when a watchman stops you, you're actually thanking him for stopping you. And that's the kind of way we should do, because he is actually doing it not for himself, he's doing it for all of us. And that's the same thing for trainings. People must realize that the training they're going for is not for themselves, it is for all of us, and we must be able to do it.
Thank you. Let's see from George.
I think just a quick comment. You know, this menace, which is a global menace, we are dealing with ideology. So maybe authorities need to rethink that most of our young people right here in Kenya, they are recruited. Can we think of giving them a time, you know, to come up and be rehabilitated? Rehabilitation maybe can save more attacks. And of course, you know, Kenya, we have challenges of unemployment, a lot of youth out there, they are looking for small money. So we need to really think that we are no longer now saying that there are people from elsewhere coming to attack us. It's our own brothers, our own sisters. So that's something that we need to rethink as business people, as government, as all the actors talking about terrorism, to rehabilitate these young people. And the other thing is that, of course, training need to go as low level as nursery school, primary school. When we were young, we were told that if you see bees coming, the first thing you do, you lie low, flat. So do our people know that when you hear that bomb, what happens? And we require the support of everyone, the media, to educate the population. And the best time to educate these people was like when we had this attack, because everybody, every eye is on TV. That's the time to give this education, to educate people on how to counter these kind of attacks. And of course, I support the arming of security guards. We are talking about 500,000 people. And maybe I'm a member of KEPSA, and maybe we request that maybe we go out there and this kind of free training we give to these people. And then there are those companies that are higher level than others. They can be authorized to carry guns, because as Mori was saying, if somebody has got a bomb, you have nothing, you have only a rungu. What will you do? But if there's a senior guy somewhere with a revolver, and this guy comes up like how they came out, you can be the first one to respond instead of waiting for 80 minutes for our security to arrive. And I think that could be the future.
Right.
Because for sure, Debarl, terrorism is not ending.
Yes.
It is a part and parcel of our lives. So we better survive and know how to behave when it happens.
Yeah, true. Very, 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 very true. Let's hear from Willie briefly.
I think it's just to support that. And if you look at what happened in Westgate, if you look at what was happening in Riverside, you'll notice that among the first few respondents, I actually saw Anthony Wahome of National Gun Owners Association. The private armed people were actually among the first respondents and saved quite a number of people because they already have that information. So arming the guards is already giving that particular installation a first line of defense, so that when I actually see this, then I'm actually gonna do that. And then at least we'll be able to hold, because what will happen by that particular mall, the point is if it's a mall, the people who are armed, who are the security guards and all that, they'll actually know we are going to be converging towards this area as the other staff members are actually trying to exit, the other people are trying to hold there. The people, otherwise right now you're just having the guys only with the biggest strength. So arming guards responsibly is very important.
Thank you. Thank you. Arming guards responsibly is important. But what is the position? Even as we were planning to give our headline thoughts, what is the position? Because yes, we had this thumbs up, as I mentioned before, from the Cabinet Secretary, that this is a good idea, noble idea. But what is the current state of play? Are they armed or they're not? Or
ask Sewe.
That is the question. This is for Sewe, actually. Yeah?
First of all, let me clarify something, that Kenya National Chamber of Commerce are members of KEPSA.
No, it's not enough. Anyway, that's
that's not another debate here. Yeah. Or is using subdelaying tactics.
We are members in both. We are members in the Chambers and KEPSA. Okay, and many companies are members in both.
All right, Mr. Sewe, please.
We'll share that information. It's in the public domain, so that we see how best.
Right now it's with KEPSA. Not with Chamber.
Not with the Chamber?
Yeah, it's with KEPSA. So it's their
So, but why are we cagey with this information?
I think it's not cagey because it's meant to all members of KEPSA. And for example, RETRAC sits in my sector board, where all this information was passed, and where that is where our CEO got the information and took advantage of the same. But nevertheless, we'll share it with the Chamber, because we want each and every person to benefit from some of those programs which can at least reduce some of these fatalities. Arming of security guards. Security guards are not lesser Kenyans. They are equally Kenyans. Every Kenyan is entitled to be armed under Firearms Licensing Act. And if you look at what happened in Dusit, most of the people who responded were Kenyans, were civilians, and they were equally armed, and they were not security guards. So what is happening is, at one point when Parliament was discussing this particular bill, which I'm referring, Private Security Regulatory Bill, they became so specific to the sector, under Section 53, that no security guard shall be armed. When the minister came up with that intent of arming this particular sector, we brought that section to his attention, that unless this section is amended, it will create some complication in terms of implementing it. And we have also taken it with the Parliamentary Committee for Administration of National Security. That one does not say that we don't have armed private security actors, because as an individual, you can apply.
Yes.
Once you apply, you will be subjected to the existing laws, and you will be provided. What was being discussed is that these entities called the companies providing this particular service, can they also be subjected as companies and also choose staff within themselves whom they think they can subject to the vetting process so that they can own these farms on behalf of the company? Which we are saying, yes, a noble idea, putting into consideration that the government has a plan to make sure that it releases the national security players, to concentrate on the national infrastructures, then leave what I was saying, private complex entities to be guarded by private security firms. So as we speak, the law is very rigid, but we are discussing it with the ministry, and that is why probably the implementation took a while, because when they also noticed about it and we engaged the Parliament, they said, yes, it is only fair if we do it in the right way. But any member in this particular republic is entitled to be armed. That is the position, the way it stands.
Fantastic. And let's just give our headline thoughts also. Maybe just to ask you, Sewe, why are we then coming up with the critical infrastructure bill, the CCTV policy, and we have the disaster management bill, of which I know now this could actually be heading to the 11th year. That is, no one is actually pushing the envelope. Could we maybe amend this particular bill and enrope this so that we pass one bill? that you can actually enrope the critical infrastructure bill within the disaster management bill and the CCTV policy within the disaster management bill. Instead of coming up with separate bills, then we're trying to push Parliament with these bills. Disaster management for a decade right now has not been, acted upon. Very briefly, because we're winding up.
My experience engaging with the Parliament sometimes is that passing a law normally takes a while. The Private Security Regulatory Act took us not less than 10 years at the end of the day.
See?
What you're proposing is also being discussed under the guidance and advice of the Attorney General, whether all these things can be merged at the end of the day. But all that we have to appreciate is that there were creation of different sectors of the society which felt that they were supposed to be given attention. And to be specific, the people who brought the concept of the Critical Infrastructure Protection Bill were energy and ICT, which thought that the investment as the infrastructure were not being given the attention that they wanted. When they wanted this infrastructure to be included in the Protected Areas Act, then the interpretation of that particular act was so much a reference to government building to an extent that they thought that they wanted some attention. But what I think, in my own opinion, is that this particular Critical Infrastructure Protection Bill is supposed to provide a link between the Critical Protection Unit, which is under the administration police, and the private sector, so that when there is an incident, there is always a way of how coordination can be done at the end of the day.
Thank you. Yeah. Mureo, your headline thoughts briefly as we're winding up.
Well, I've heard Sewe, and gentlemen, you've heard, he has taken it upon himself to share this information, and I think that's the only way out, Bwana Sewe. For me, I have one quick solution, and I said that, and Dr. did not agree with me, but if at the very least you have a siren that goes off, I can tell you a panic button will scuttle this at the first line of defense. If a siren goes off, because you have seen guys, they could well have driven through because you tried to stop them and their mission must be accomplished. A siren is something that says, if that siren goes off, take cover. Okay, so that even by the time these guys drive through to the hotel, the sirens are on, and even the neighborhood now is aware that there is a panic, that there is a situation that needs to be addressed. So we need to have that. The second thing is guns are expensive. And I blame the business owners, because if you really go the strategy that you've talked about, there should be some key people within the security system of a building that actually own guns. Because if you know what a firearm can do, and if you hear a gunshot has gone off before you fire yours, then the first thing is, first of all, you also now start looking out, where is this gunshot coming from? So you scuttle the whole idea of their entry. And the really is just to try and destabilize the terrorists.
Thank you.
So let's work on this together. The laws must be passed quickly. It's urgent.
Thank you very much, James Mureo. Willie Kimani, your headline thoughts.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost is as we speak right now, malls are more secured. Please, the public, please feel free to actually go in. We have more enhanced security right now. Definitely, as you actually speak about this, more training has to actually be given to the first responders.
Yes.
We are arming the guards will actually be a very big plus towards this. And of course, for being able to get the public aware and informed of how to react to this.
Thank you, Willie. Let's hear from Colin Sodota, your headline thoughts.
I think we must end on a positive note, that we must celebrate ourselves as Kenyans in terms of how we reacted to this. I think that's what. That's the first thing. The second thing is, but we must learn lessons. So we must be critical about the places we could have done better. And one of the ones that we haven't discussed, for example, is our registration of vehicles. If you looked at the headlines, you'd find that the vehicle that was being used is alleged to have, we are having 2 number plates.
Yeah, there was a double registration.
That one of the ones had not been transferred to the rightful owner. And I think one of the things we must start asking ourselves, because there are many instances where people buy vehicles, people buy property, but they spend too much time before transferring it to themselves. I think we need to tighten the law so that there is a limit, that maybe X number of months, if you haven't transferred it, then there will be consequences, so that we can be able to ensure that. And then the public agencies responsible for those registrations must ensure that they are much more careful, that there is lack of any corrupt elements, because one corrupt element can cost us lives, as we know from this experience.
Thank you very much. Jojo Shiri, your headline thoughts.
I think for Kenyan people, we need to adopt Nyumba Kumi initiative with a lot of enthusiasm. Number 2, let's look at the plight of our youth. We are with them, how we can be able to help them to avoid joining these groups. secret groups. And then let's not be reactive. Right now we are reactive. The action has happened. Let's be proactive. Find for ways to prevent these kind of happenings by sharing information.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. I must commend you for also this discussion this morning. Mr. Silvanus Asewe, who is a KEPSA Securities Sector Board member and a PSRA Director. Thank you for coming through this morning. Willie Kimani, Chairman of RITRAC, we thank you. That is the Retail Trade Association of Kenya. Thank you for coming through this morning. Mr. James Mureo, who is the Vice Chair of the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you for coming through this morning as well. And Colin Sodote, who is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi and a columnist with the Business Daily. Thank you for coming through. And George Washuri, the founder and CEO of Optiven Group. Thank you for coming through this morning. I'll be remiss if I just don't read one or two tweets as we're winding up. We have Green Shop East Africa saying, instead of focusing on arming security firms, why not recruit more police officers or GSU who can then be assigned to various malls, banks and security companies, right? There are his thoughts. We have also Bonnie Tinder saying, I agree, terrorism is not ending today. We need to put mechanisms to avoid instances of terror attacks. Also, we have Felix King saying,